Hey, how's it going? Zach D Productions here, and I'm here for a list video for you guys. So for this list, I'll be going over 5 franchises that I don't think that there ever has been a bad movie to. I thought that this would be a fun one to make. So I have a list of 5 franchises here. Now, feel free to let me know what other franchises you can think of that also has never had a bad movie. Keep in mind, this is just my opinion because I know that there's some movies in these franchises that some people are not a fan of. So I do understand that. Keep in mind, this is just my opinion at the end of the day. This list is also in no particular order, so let's go ahead and get started. Now, I think the first one I'll go over here is Top Gun. Granted, there has only been 2 Top Gun movies, so you could say it's not really fair to say that there hasn't been a bad Top Gun movie, but for a franchise that only has 2 films, Top Gun is a very big franchise. I mean, obviously, when it comes to like brand recognition and stuff, like there's a lot of people who know of Top Gun, even though there only has been 2 movies, at least so far. Will we ever get a third Top Gun film? Who knows? I mean, only time will tell, and hopefully they'll stay consistent and make that film just as great as the 2 that we have. I mean, if we don't get any more Top Gun films, I would be okay with that. I would welcome a third film, but if we don't get any more, I'm okay with that. So, both the Top Gun films are great. Obviously, the release length is something that is worth noting because the original came out in the 80s and the sequel, Top Gun Maverick, came out in 2022. So there's been a long release gap in between both these films. So yeah, I know that this film was highly anticipated, Top Gun Maverick, I'm referring to here, and for good reason. I actually do think that Top Gun Maverick is a step up from the first film, just slightly though. I wouldn't say that it's like so much better or whatever, but it's just a little bit better, I would say. Both these films are great, and honestly, has there ever been a bad Tom Cruise movie? I've yet to see anything that I disliked with Tom Cruise, so there's that. But yeah, Top Gun, not a bad film in this franchise. Both films are great. So next, we got Back to the Future. Now, Back to the Future, this is actually a franchise that was a big part of my childhood. I've grown up with these films. And to be perfectly honest, I want to say that Back to the Future was one of the first movies I've ever watched. I mean, I've seen it at a young age, and, of course, I watched the sequels. So, yeah, not a bad film in the Back to the Future trilogy. I think anyone can agree on that. I think any film fanatic or film fan or whatever can agree that there's not a bad film in the Back to the Future franchise. Now, when it comes to ranking the films, that's where it gets a little tricky. Like, what is truly the weakest of the Back to the Future trilogy? In my opinion, it's the third film, probably because it's more Western themed. I've never really been into Westerns personally. I've never been into that theme or whatever. I don't hate it, but I've just never been too big of a fan of it personally. But I do like Back to the Future Part 3 quite a bit, though. It's still a good movie, even though it is probably my least favorite. I know that a lot of fans say that the second one is the weakest, but I actually like the second one. They took it in a darker direction in that film in comparison to the first film. I actually like how they actually went to the future in the second film. But the first film is probably the best. It's still probably the best of the trilogy. And I don't think that there ever was plans to make sequels to Back to the Future. I think that that was the original plan, to not make any sequels to Back to the Future. But I think because that movie did so well, they decided to make a couple more. So they decided to turn it into an entire trilogy. So there's that. But yeah, the first one is, of course, the best. And I think that these films are really well written as well. The way that they incorporate the past stuff and the future stuff, that's all really well done here. These are some of the best time travel films of all time, and I don't think anyone would argue otherwise. So yeah, Back to the Future, all 3 of these films have been great. Yeah, not a bad film in this trilogy. Now, do I think that these films are a bit overplayed? Yes. I think I'd be okay if I didn't see any of the Back to the Future films for a number of years at this point, because I've seen them countless times. And I know people personally who can still watch these films, even though they've probably seen them way more times than I have, and they're not sick of them. They're probably just bigger fans of this franchise than I am, which is fine, but just thought I'd point that out. But either way, yeah. These films, they're played a little too much. You could say they're a little worn out. That's just my opinion personally, though. So either way, Back to the Future, regardless of whether or not these films are overplayed or, they get a ton of replay or whatever, these films are still good. They're still really good, well-written films, great stories, and memorable characters, of course. So, yeah, Back to the Future, yeah, they're overplayed, but they're still good for what they are. There's no denying that. They're still classics. All three of them, they're classics. So, moving along, next we got Godzilla. Now, how many Godzilla films are there so far? Like 40, 50, whatever? Like, there's been a lot. There's been a lot of Godzilla movies. And it's really impressive that there's been that many Godzilla movies and not one of them has been bad. At least as far as I'm aware, there has not been a bad Godzilla movie. Now, yeah, Godzilla's Revenge is definitely one of the weaker ones. It's decent though, like I wouldn't call it straight up bad or anything, but Godzilla's Revenge, yeah, it's definitely one of the weakest of the Godzilla films, especially the crap with Manila, Godzilla's son. That stuff was stupid. I mean, the whole concept of the son of Godzilla is just really dumb for me. I mean, I guess it depends on what the movie is. Like, I thought that the stuff with the son of Godzilla was better done in other films than, the older ones, So, yeah, Godzilla's Revenge, it's a decent film, but it is easily one of the weakest of the Godzilla films. And I know that some people crap on Godzilla 1998. I don't know why. I actually do like this film. This was the first American Godzilla movie. I know that there's people that crap on the design of Godzilla because he looks like an iguana or whatever. I always thought in that film he looked like a dinosaur. Now, for a while, I wasn't too crazy about the design of 98 Godzilla, but I've actually grown to like the design a little bit. It's actually grown on me a little bit. Yeah, it's not typical for Godzilla, but I've actually grown to like it. And of course, I do like a lot of the other films from Godzilla, like, of course, the original 1954 Gojira. That's, of course, a classic, and that has to be seen by any film fan, I would say. And the 60s films are good, and the 70s films are good, too. Of course, like Godzilla vs. Megalon, which I find to be kind of underrated. It's kind of a goofy film. You could say it hasn't aged too well, but I like the film. And of course, Godzilla vs. Gigan, I do love, And even like the Millennium era Godzilla stuff I do like Godzilla 2000, Final Wars, Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, Tokyo SOS. Yeah, I do like the Millennium era of Godzilla quite a bit. The MonsterVerse, I do like. I don't like them as much as the Toho Japan Godzilla films, but I do like them though. King of the Monsters, I think, is maybe the best so far of the MonsterVerse films, in my opinion. So, yeah, I do love Godzilla. I could talk all day about Godzilla, so yeah, not a bad film. I mean, maybe I'm just biased because, I'm a pretty big fan of Godzilla, so yeah, I've yet to see a bad Godzilla film. I mean, I don't know, maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just the fact that, if Godzilla's on screen, it's a good film. Maybe that's just how my brain works, but I don't know. But for me, I've liked everything that I've seen in terms of Godzilla, at least as far as, the actual films. So, yeah, I do love Godzilla. So next, we got Rocky. I think anyone can pretty much agree that there hasn't been a bad Rocky movie either, with, of course, Sylvester Stallone, definitely a legendary movie star, one of my favorite actors personally, and one of the greatest action stars of all time. So, not a bad movie in the Rocky series. Now, I would say I just like the last two, Rocky V and Rocky Balboa, and I love the first four. That's kind of my opinion. And when it comes to my least favorite, again, it's probably either Rocky V or Rocky Balboa. Those two kind of go back and forth as my least favorite, but I do like both those films quite a bit still. They're still good films for sure. But the first four are flawless. They're excellent films. I love the first four Rocky films. To be perfectly honest, Rocky IV might be my favorite of the Rocky films. And maybe Dolph Lundgren has a lot to do with that. I'm definitely a big fan of Dolph. I do love Rocky IV. It does have the structure of an action film, which is really cool. Because these films are supposed to be dramas, so I found that to be kind of cool. Rocky III is probably my second favorite, to be honest. And then as for my third favorite, probably the first one. So those are probably my top three in terms of the Rocky films. And the second film is good too. It's not the best, but it is good though. So again, can't go wrong with any of the Rocky films. They're all fantastic. They're all great movies for sure. Lastly, we got Mission Impossible. This is another one similar to Godzilla, where I can see some people disagreeing with, because some people might say, oh, Zach, you forgot that Mission Impossible 2 existed. No, I didn't, because I actually like Mission Impossible 2. Yeah, it is the weakest, but it's still a good film. I know that some people said that Mission Impossible 2 was basically Tom Cruise's James Bond, which I can kind of see, but I still think it's a solid film for what it is. It's not all bad. Again, I do agree it is the weakest out of all the Mission Impossible films, but it's still good for what it is, I think. The first Mission Impossible is, of course, great. The third film I love. The fourth one is good. I believe it's called Ghost Protocol. And Rogue Nation, pretty good. Not one of the best, but still pretty good. Fallout is one of the best Mission Impossible films, I think. And then, of course, the most recent entry, Dead Reckoning Part 1. A great film as well. Definitely looking forward to Part 2. So I loved all the Mission Impossible films. Of course, Tom Cruise, like I said, has Tom Cruise ever put out a bad film? As far as I'm concerned, I haven't seen a bad film from Tom Cruise. So all the Mission Impossible films I do like, yes, including the second one. Again, like I said before, it is the weakest, but I still like it for what it is, though. It's not straight up bad or anything. So Mission Impossible, all these films are really good, I think. The second film, again, I think it's just good, but the rest are really great. So that is my list of movie franchises that I think there hasn't been a bad movie to. So feel free to let me know what you think. What are other movie franchises that you can think of that would fall under this category? Feel free to let me know. So on that note, thank you for watching. Have a good one.